Good evening, visitors. Welcome to the Australian War Memorial's last post ceremony. My name is Nathan Boyd, and joining us today from the Royal Australian Air Force is Squadron Leader Catherine Humphreys. We warmly welcome the family of Private George Frederick Thorne, whose story will be told shortly. We welcome the veterans who have served, those that are still serving, and the families that love and support them. We acknowledge the members of RSL and Services Club Association, RSL Victoria, and RSL Queensland who are watching the broadcast of this ceremony across Australia. During this evening's ceremony, wreaths will be laid at the base of the pool of reflection by family and visitors to the memorial. If you're able, please stand and join in singing the national anthem. If you're able, please be seated. The Australian War Memorial was a vision of Charles Bean, Australia's First World War official historian. Bean landed with the Australian troops on Gallipoli and stayed with them at the front through to the end of the war. The idea of this national memorial and museum came to him at Pozières, France, in the depths of the bloody fighting of 1916. Bean's idea was that this would be a place where family and friends could mourn loved ones buried in faraway places. It would also be a place that could help all Australians understand what these men and women had endured and what they had done for us. Bean's vision, to which we remain true, is best expressed as inscribed in the entrance of the memorial's galleries. Here is their spirit, in the heart of the land they loved, and here we guard the record which they themselves made. Tonight, we will read the story behind just one of those on the Roll of Honour, which lists the names of more than 102,000 men and women who gave their lives for us in war and on operation for more than a century. But first, we present a lament, Flowers of the Forest. Wreaths or floral tributes will now be laid at the base of the pool of reflection.
Today, we remember and pay tribute to Private George Frederick Thorn. George Thorn was born on the 5th of June 1897 in Waratah, Tasmania, the son of hairdresser Walter Thorn and his wife Mary. George had 4 siblings, Amy, Leslie, Arthur and Albert, and received his education at Waratah State School, where he was awarded academic prizes. His father, Walter, died of tuberculosis when George was just 8 years old. His mother later remarried and moved her young family to the coastal town of Devonport. In his youth, George was a keen musician, often taking part in competitions as a baritone soloist. He served in the senior cadets before taking up an apprenticeship as a printer with Harris & Co in Devonport. There, he also took part in pigeon racing with the local homing society. George Thorn enlisted in the Australian Imperial Force on the 21st of April 1915. Being just 18 years old, he required his mother's written permission to join. He was allocated to the 26th Battalion as a private and embarked from Brisbane in June 1915 on board the troop ship Aeneas. Private Thorn reached the Gallipoli Peninsula in September 1915 after the August offensive. His battalion served in a defensive capacity in contested areas such as Courtney's Post and Russell's Top. Shortly after his arrival, he wrote a letter home to Tasmania. "We landed here last Sunday morning. We haven't been in the trenches yet as we are a reserve battalion to the division. All the other crowd have gone into action and we are likely to be called out any day. They have had us making a road up to the trenches so far. We have just about finished it. The first day we went out, our guide took us into the wrong gully and the Turks put a few shrapnel into us, but only got 2 of our chaps. We were lucky they didn't get more. From what I have heard of the Turks, they are fair fighters. They haven't fired on the Red Cross or used gas yet. Remember me to all the Devonport Homing Society members and tell them they ought to chuck it in and sign on." A week later, Thorn fell ill with influenza. It was bad enough that he was removed from the peninsula and sent to Lemnos to recover. He briefly rejoined his unit on Gallipoli in October but fell ill for a second time and was sent back to the hospital in Lemnos. Thorn's battalion left Gallipoli on the 12th of December 1915, shortly before the evacuation of the peninsula took place. He rejoined his battalion in Alexandria in January of 1916, where Australian units were preparing to head to the Western Front. Private Thorn reached France in March 1916 and in June took part in the first trench raid by Australian troops on the Western Front. From the trenches, Private Thorn described the conditions on the front in a letter to his brother Leslie, saying, "It's rotten in the trenches when it rains and you can't take your boots off when you go to bed and your blankets get mud all over. When you're out in it, you're falling all over the place." His first major battle was to take place just a month later near the French village of Pozières, which was to become the site of bloody fighting over the coming months. The Allies were attempting to force the enemy back from the high ground and take the now ruined village. Over 42 days, the Allies made 19 separate attacks against German positions, which came at a tremendous cost. Following the battle, Allied casualties numbered a staggering 23,000 men killed, missing or wounded. Among their number was Private George Thorn, who went missing on the 29th of July, a few days after the death of his stepfather, who was killed in the same battle while serving with the 12th Battalion. Because of the heavy shelling and the intense confusion, cases of missing soldiers such as Private Thorn were common. Thorn's mother repeatedly begged base records for any news of her son, but by 1917 she had no information. It was not until one of Thorn's comrades came forward with news about him that his fate could be determined. The comrade reported, "Thorn got wounded during our attack at Pozières on July 29, 1916. A 25th Battalion man started to carry him back, but in doing so was killed, and Thorn was wounded again. This was out in no man's land. It is possible that Thorn was made a prisoner. Further inquiries found no trace of Private Thorn in prisoner of war camps. In the absence of any further news, in 1917, a court of inquiry determined that Thorn had been killed in action on the 29th of July 1916 during the attack at Pozières. He was 19 years old. His name is listed on the Roll of Honour on my right, amongst almost 62,000 Australians who died while serving in the First World War. His photograph is displayed today beside the Pool of Reflection. This is but one of the many stories of service and sacrifice told here at the Australian War Memorial. We now remember Private George Frederick Thorn, who gave his life for us, for our freedoms, and in the hope of a better world.
Please stand for the reading of the Ode and the sounding of the last post.
They shall grow not old as we that are left grow old. Age shall not weary them, nor the years condemn. At the going down of the sun and in the morning, we will remember them.
We will remember them.
Lest we forget.
Lest we forget. We leave you this evening with the words of the memorial's founder, Charles Bean. Many a man lying out there at Pozières or in the low scrub of Gallipoli with his poor, tired senses barely working through the fever of his brain has thought in his last moments, well, it's over. But in Australia, they will be proud of this. Ladies and gentlemen, girls and boys, that concludes the last post ceremony. On behalf of the Director and staff, thank you for visiting the Australian War Memorial today and for your continued support of the Memorials Development Project. We wish you all a very pleasant evening.